Good evening. I'm Betty Boswell, and I'm your moderator tonight for the Young Adult panel. And these are writers who write for young adults in the Christian genre. So I'm going to read a brief biography for each one and mention their book about their that they are featuring for this conference. And if anyone joins us, we will be taking questions. If not, I have a list of questions. Our first person is JPC Allen, and she started her writing career in second grade with an homage to Scooby Doo. She's been tracking down mysteries ever since and written mystery short stories for Mount Zion Ridge Press. Her Christmas mystery, A Rose from the Ashes, was a Selah finalist at the Blue Ridge Mountains Christian Writers Conference in 2020. Her first novel, a YA mystery, A Shadow in the Snow, released in 2021. Online, she offers tips and prompts to ignite the creative spark in every kind of writer. She also leads workshops for tweens, teens, and adults, encouraging them to discover adventure of writing. Coming from a long line of mountaineers, she is a lifelong Buckeye, and that means Ohio. A short blurb on her book is as 19-year-old Ray Riley gets to know her newly found father and his family. A stalker won't let her forget her late mother's notorious past. Fearing the threat will make her family reject her, Ray investigates the mystery herself, but her amateur sleuthing may cost her dad she's always wanted. May cost her the dad that she's always wanted. So welcome, JPC Allen.
Thank you.
All right. We also have Angela Shelton. She works as a healthcare accountant and owns and works on a cattle ranch in Georgia. Calling on her experience from the farm and drawing on her husband's military and law enforcement understanding, she's created a post-apocalyptic world in her novel series Collapse. The stories revolve around a small town Georgia family who turned to farming just in the nick of time to be self sufficient when the supply chains of the world collapse. Ms. Shelton is a member of the Christian Indie Publishing Association, the American Christian Fiction Writers, and Word Weavers International. The series is available on Amazon. So welcome, Angela.
Thank you.
And Marie Sontag, bringing the past to life, one adventure at a time, epitomizes the passion and writing career of Marie Sontag. Having taught middle school for over 15 years, she knows how to grab and keep her readers' attention. Yosemite Trail discovered her latest release furthers Dr. Sontag's tradition of crafting adventurous historical novels for middle grade and YA readers. Dr. Sontag holds a BA in social science and MA and PhD in education. When not researching, writing, or conducting author talks with students, she can be found romping with her grandkids. So here's a blurb about her book. Join 16-year-old Daniel Whitcomb as he juggles a growing relationship with Virginia Reed, one of the survivors of the Donner Party. He helps his Miwok friend learn how to read and write and manages the account ledgers for his guardian, Jim Savage, at his trading posts in the California gold fields. Is Jim correct when he says you can't possess what you can't protect? Does that justify fighting the Yosemites after they attacked Jim's posts, or the Mariposa Battalion's entrance into Yosemite to rout out the Awanichi? So this has got lots of adventures. Welcome, Marie. So I mentioned your books briefly. I would like you to share a little bit more about your book if you would like to. So JPC, you want to go first?
Sure. My novel is a sequel to a short story I wrote. Mount Zion Ridge Press was putting together an anthology of Christmas fiction, and I submitted a Christmas mystery. And I was very excited to write a Christmas mystery because I love mysteries, and some of the best mysteries have been written at Christmas time, with a Christmas setting. And I fell in love with the character of Ray and her search for her father, and also for the man who attacked her pregnant mother 20 years ago. And as I completed that short story, I was already thinking about what's going to happen next. And so I began working on the novel, and it's just so much fun exploring Ray's relationship with her father. That's the core of the story. And then she's got all these new relatives, and some welcome her with open arms and some don't. And then there's the mystery of the stalker, who's connected to her late mother's past. And I loved working out the plot, planning the clues, and really wrote it as a whodunit that readers can try to solve along with Ray. And then when they see the resolution, they can go back through and see, if they didn't figure it out, what did they miss?
Okay. All right, Angela, would you like to share any more about your book?
Thank you. I come from a big family. I come from a family of, I'm the middle of 7 children. So to me, family is really important. So I wanted to write a story about a family. And this teenage girl is the protagonist in the family. And I thought it would be interesting to not only share what she goes through and her journey through the book, but also how it affects her family. And she does make a mistake, an error in judgment at the beginning of the book that affects her entire family, and how the family rallies around her and how she recovers from that. Again, it's a post-apocalyptic book, so a mistake that you make in that kind of a world can be very dangerous. I also, as I mentioned in my bio, I live on a cattle ranch. I work full-time as an accountant, as well as working the cattle ranch. So I'm familiar with what they would experience. And so I just thought it was a fun way to get started in the writing.
Okay, Marie. Oops, your sound is off, Marie.
Okay, there we go.
Yes.
I
Tell us
wish there was
about
a
your
thing
book.
that would warn you ahead of time. So this is the book. This is what it looks like. Yosemite Trail Discovered. And that one just came out in March. It's actually book 2, but this is for young adults because my character, this is my main character, and he's fictional. And then this is the Miwok he meets, and she's fictional. And then this is the historical person, Virginia Reed, and this is a historical person, Jim Savage. So he is supposedly an orphan, and Jim is his guardian, which is how I can bring the history into it so that youth can identify more clearly. They're seeing it through a fictional character's eyes, so you can have the drama of the fictional story, but it's in the historical setting. He's the one who first led a battalion to go into Yosemite. So the book really explores the clash of cultures, which is always pertinent no matter what age you're in. You know, we always have some kind of clash of culture. And how do you, if you have a Christian worldview, how do you deal with that? There's lots of ways to consider it, but he is raised in a Christian home. And so he's struggling with, I want to help the Miwok. I want justice for them. I want justice for the Yosemite. And yet I want justice for the whites as well. So he's really driven by this sense for justice. But he has his own drama of mystery where his parents were killed in a fire, and he wants to go back to Illinois and solve that mystery of his parents. So that's going on in the background. He wants actually revenge. So he's struggling in the whole story. That's what he has to overcome. The lie that the world should be fair. That's his lie. And he realizes the world is not fair. And how do I deal with that as a Christian? So that's kind of the big struggle in this book. I love historical fiction. And as you said in my bio, trying to bring that to life for the youth and then apply it to their own lives today.
Okay. So there's lots and lots of genres to choose from today as a writer. Is there any particular reason you have chosen YA, young adult? Or JPC?
That seems to be where my brain goes. Writing teen characters just seems natural to me.
Mm.
I don't know if it's because there's a large part of me that still feels like a teenager, or when I first started writing, I was a teenager. The first time I really settled down to write a long story or a novel, I was 18, my freshman year in college, and recovering from an appendectomy. But the teen characters have always appealed to me. And I think in a lot of ways, they make a great amateur detective, because you can get away with being nosy and getting into trouble more acceptably as a teenager. And I also think when you want your character to change over the course of the story, it's easier with a teen character, because that is a time of a lot of change. And so I don't try to fight my natural tendency to do teen characters.
How about Angela?
I'm kind of a cross genre with post-apocalyptic and young adult. I guess because we're also in the Christian genre as well. I was raised in a church that was talked a lot about the end times. So post-apocalyptic came naturally to me. But I also have felt drawn for years to minister to the youth, but I'm terrible at it. I actually tried Sunday school teaching to young adults and bombed terribly, but I felt like I could write in the genre. So those were the reasons I was really drawn to the genre.
Okay. Marie?
Personally, I love middle grade. I love junior high school. I taught it for 15 years, social studies, language arts. And yet, when you cross over and get beyond 14, more the lower end of the young adult, like you said, Jennifer, they can do so much more. And so you can get into a little more complex topics. So I do write for young adult if the topic that I want to write about calls for it. One that's coming out, I hope, before Christmas is this one. I don't have it yet because we're still editing, but it's Underground Scouts. So this is World War II. And so that for that reason, I made it young adult, because again, I have a fictional character as the central point, but he's a Boy Scout, and it's true story of the Scouts involved in trying to help push the Germans out of Poland. So that's the backdrop of it. So he has to be a young adult. So I do it sort of by default. The first book that goes with the Yosemite Trail is actually middle grade, because my character Daniel here with Jim is on the Oregon Trail. So he first is on the Oregon Trail, but then there's a gap. So he's only 13 here. But then in book 2, he's 16 already. So it's kind of awkward that a series is split between middle grade and young adult. The librarian had to put one in one section and one in the other, which is kind of weird because you're supposed to have them together. So that's why I do have books for young adult, but my heart is really middle grade, because in college I took sociology classes that said that even though they can think a little better as a young adult, that's when they start dealing with identity. And I really wanted to hit them at that age that, what are you using as choices for how you're going to establish that identity? So that's my sweet spot. But I do love young adult because you can think more.
Okay. All right. So this kind of came out of our pre-session discussion. How does your real life affect your novel's plot, characters, or settings? JPC?
Well, it has a huge effect. I've found that to save time in one way, and also to bring authenticity, is to use what I'm familiar with. So my teen detective, Riley, works as a checkout clerk at her local library. And I worked as a children's librarian for 10 years. So that's a job I didn't have to do any research for. I know how that works. And because of that, I can use terms and lingos and the situations such your public library, you deal with the public, that means anybody can walk through the doors. So I think that brings something fresh to my novels. I grew up in Belmont County, Ohio, which is part of Appalachian, Ohio. And I've worked in that area. So I decided to set my novels there. I invented an 89th county, Marlin County. And I think my experiences there also bring an authenticity. And as far as plots go, I haven't been involved in any stalker cases, but that's where my imagination comes in. Although I have done a lot of research with law enforcement to get that part correct.
Okay, thank you. Angela, how does your real life affect your plot, characters, or setting?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I do live on a ranch, and it's something that a lot of people, when they find out that I live and work on a ranch, the first thing asked is, do you have a horse? No, we don't have horses. We have cows. But it turns out that so many people are so interested in that. So many people say, oh, I've always wanted to do that, but was never able to. So I'm able to write about something that interests people that they would like to learn about from firsthand experience. And also having a husband who has worked in law enforcement for 25 years, he is a wealth of information as far as making sure that I get things right. You know, would this really happen or would that really happen? So he's a great resource for me, and even things that he doesn't know personally, he knows a lot of other people in law enforcement. So that's helped a lot. And sometimes there's things that have happened on our ranch that people really would not believe actually happened. And you'll put it in a book and they'll go, that wouldn't really happen. I'll go, yeah, it happens. So it just gives you a lot of fodder.
Okay. Anne Marie.
I was thinking two things. One is I usually have a protagonist that's a boy, because as a teacher, the girls would read without you asking, but the boys forget it unless it was something they were interested in. So that's why I write adventure historical novels, because I want the boys to read more. But then I always have a female that's kind of a secondary character. And so that way the girls will read it too. They don't mind reading a book that's got a guy as a central character, but having the girl there gives them something to identify with as well. So that's one thing. That's just my passion. And then second, as I mentioned, because I've taught in the public schools, I kind of have a feel for what kids are looking for and what they like and how they talk, and what's funny and what's not funny to them at different ages. And so I try to hit more of an educational bent, since it's historical fiction, to get them interested in history. And then in the back of the book, well, this one's the middle grade, but in the back of the book, well, no, I think at the end of the chapters, actually, I have links that go to places. So if it's a homeschool person or just trying to a parent wanting to supplement their curriculum for school, I have curriculum online that I've written for the books. So kind of weds the two things for me. It's historical because I love history, and has educational, and then again written for boys.
All right. So we have a question from the chat. I've got a few more too, but let's go.
Oh, yay.
This one. Do you have a book from your youth that was your favorite book? So JPC.
Wow, that's a tough one. I would say a book from my youth that has influenced my current novel was the McBroom series by Sid Fleischman. These were written in the late 60s, early 70s, and they were long picture books. They were picture books with a lot of text, and they were usually tall tales. And it was about Josh McBroom, the narrator. He was the father, and he had his wife, Melissa, and they had 11 children. And they lived on this magical 1-acre farm. And I loved that. I loved the big family. And I loved the voice of the father. He told it in first person because he sounded a lot like my grandparents, who were from West Virginia. And so I've been writing since I was 18, and I find it really interesting that the book I finally got published has a big extended family, and it's a very important dynamic to my main character. So those picture books all those years ago have stuck with me.
All right, Angela, how about a book from your childhood?
I used to love mysteries. I used to love the Nancy Drew mysteries, right? And that teenager that had that, was like an adult, not afraid, because I was kind of timid as a child. I think one of the books that most influenced me was a book I only read, I want to say I've read it twice in my life because it scared me so much. And it was The Hounds of the Baskerville. I don't know if you've read that one, but I can remember reading that book and having nightmares for months. And I just thought, how powerful it is that a book to read could be that powerful, and how much it is reality in your mind, and the power of the written word.
Okay. And Marie?
I had a hard time as a kid finding books that really interested me because, again, I go for the adventure. I want something to be exciting. I don't want description. And in our day, so much was description. So actually, I read like most all of the Hardy Boys. I wasn't a Nancy Drew girl. I wanted the Hardy Boys. So again, kind of affected me as writing from a male POV a lot. I guess that's it. Because it was hard for me to find books that I really was interested in.
All right. So here's one from me. How long did it take from inspiration to completion for this story that you're featuring today? JPC?
That's it. I worked in spurts. I was thinking it over for like a year before I really started working on it. And I'd worked on it about 3 months. And then the world decided to call it quits in 2020. And I had to teach my kids at home. So that's when, I'd work a while and teach and write and teach. And so it wasn't I didn't submit it until March of 2021. So probably 16 months till submission.
And Angela, how about you? How long did your book go from inspiration to submission or publication, one or the other?
I believe it took about 3 months to write, and then probably another 2 months for editing, and and then publication. So probably 6 months in total.
Wow.
Fast writer. And Marie?
Because mine are historical fiction, they take a long time. The actual inspiration for it, the idea of it, was like over 10 years ago. We had a family trip to Yosemite, and I thought, who were the first whites that came into Yosemite and why did they come? And so that was the inspiration. I started research, but then once I started writing, it took about 6 years because I thought this book would be the only book about Yosemite, but I realized I need to go back to the Oregon Trail. So then it ended up being 2 books. So I had to write the first one before I could do the second one, which is what I initially got the inspiration for. So all my historical fiction take a long time because of the research.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So if you look back on your book and think about all the things you wrote in this person's story, what is your very, very favorite thing about your book, JPC?
Oh, wow. I was thinking about this. There's a couple scenes. I really like the interaction between my main character, Ray, she's 19, and her newly found father, who's the sheriff of the county they live in. And there's a fun scene when they're having breakfast together at her apartment. And they've made a connection. And so it's nice to see Ray relax with her new dad. And also what was a lot of fun, there is a scene in the middle of the book where she is being chased in a snowstorm by a mysterious figure. And that was just fun to write an action sequence and trying to get it right, to make it a fast read and to get the suspense in and to get her terror in. That was a lot of fun. It was a challenge, but it was a fun challenge.
Okay, Angela?
I think my favorite part is the story arc where my heroine is betrayed by someone that she trusts and tries to help, and the person that she tries to help turns on her. And because it's a post-apocalyptic and she trusts someone she shouldn't have, it puts the entire family at risk. And so because of that, she's very burned and very upset. And I love the arc of how she comes through that and on the other end and is a stronger person for it. And actually how she resolves it, I love too. I don't want to tell anybody that because that might spoil it, but
No spoilers.
Yeah.
Maria, favorite part from your story?
Yeah, I think my favorite part is when Daniel confronts Jim. Again, let me give you the visual. Daniel's confronting Jim because, again, he's a real person. He's made a lot of money in the gold fields, like over a millionaire, because he has trading posts and he sells at exuberant prices to the miners. But Daniel challenges him because Jim always says, you can't possess what you can't protect. And he found out that's true because he couldn't protect his trading posts because the Indians would burn them down. And he was struggling. How do I possess what I own? And then the Native Americans couldn't possess their land because they didn't have the ability to protect it. They were overpowered by the whites. So there's this clash where they're both trying to protect, but they can't protect it, what they're possessing. And so Daniel confronts him and says, well, maybe the answer is what you possess possessing you. And he mentions the verse about you can gain the whole world, but you lose your soul. Is that worth it? And the character, historically, Jim, in the Californians' eyes, because I lived in California for a long time, in the Californians' eyes, as I did research, especially the people who live near Yosemite, they hate Jim Savage, those who know the story, because he seems like he was really unfair to the Native Americans. But the history of it is that all the white miners really were. And he actually tried, in the end, he changed for some reason, and he tried to help the Indians. And there's a scene at the end where he dies, spoiler, but well, Daniel's still alive, and the Indians come and they weep and they wail for him. So the historical fact is that the Native Americans saw what he did try to do, because in the end he did change. So that's why I make my character the change agent, and then able to tie it in with scripture. So that's my favorite part.
All right. So, next one. Do you have another book that you're thinking about or working on or planning to do eventually, JPC?
Yes, I'm working on the second book in the Ray Riley series. Right now, the working title is A Storm in Summer. I'm terrible at titles, so that could very well change. Right now, it starts on Memorial Day. And there's two problems facing Ray and her family. The ex-wife of a family friend returns to the county with her boyfriend, and they claim that the youngest child of this family friend is actually theirs, not the father who's raised her. And then Ray's father's family has an outlaw branch that don't care to have that there's law enforcement in Ray's family. And so she has a con man uncle return to the county. And he's hinting that maybe she's calling the wrong Malinowski, that's her father's family, the wrong Malinowski dad. So she's wants to help the family friend. And she's also wondering if maybe the clues her mom left to her father's identity, her mom made a mistake.
All right. Angela? Are you
actually, I just published the third book in the Collapse series. So I'm actually stepping away from young adult and post-apocalyptic, although I've already got an idea for the next book series in my head for that. And I'm actually trying my hand at romantic suspense. Thankfully, I've got a mentor working with me because it's not coming as naturally for me, but I wanted to give it a whirl. So.
Right. And Marie?
I mentioned this one's supposed to be coming out pretty soon, Underground Scouts. And so after this comes out, my next project would be the book 2, which goes on with the same characters that are still alive, because a lot die. That they go on into the Cold War. So it'll be spy scouts instead of underground scouts. It'll be spy scouts, the ones who survive, and they go into the Cold War. So that'll be coming. I have to do a lot of research now.
All right. So my final question that I'm going to ask is, what advice would you give to a person who is new to writing at JPC?
Wow. Talent's not enough, no matter how talented you think you are. You've really got to study the books on the craft of writing, and also start writing what you read. If you really love a particular genre, that's the genre you should start writing, because you know the rules. That's what makes mysteries easy for me to write, because I've been reading them. Well, I started on Scooby-Doo, and then I started reading mysteries. And so I know what readers expect, such as if I plan a red herring, I have got to explain it at the end. It can't be like real life where you have loose ends. Mystery readers expect red herrings to be explained. So that's what I would tell a new writer.
Okay. Angela?
My advice would be to find a critique partner, a critique group, multiple critique partners if you can. I have joined the ACFW critique group, as well as Word Weavers, and authors who have learned much more than I have really helped me to improve and hone my craft. I wrote my first book is basically, I don't know, most authors probably do have one of these in a proverbial sock drawer somewhere. But my first book that I finished was a throwaway. But it took me writing a book that was a throwaway to learn how not to write. So I would definitely recommend getting into that critique group and getting other partners.
Those are both great ideas. I agree with those 100%. I would just add, just keep learning. Don't stop. If you think you've got it all, then you're going down the wrong trail. I try to always read a book on writing when I'm writing, because that way I can apply it. And if I just read a book to read it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you can apply it while you're reading it and just keep reading new books and going to conferences, I think that'd be the biggest thing. And don't take shortcuts. It's not worth it, because then you got to backtrack and fix what you messed up. So just do it right.
All right. Any other comments that anybody would like to make, or any questions? I see Hannah has joined us. If you have a question, Hannah, you can unmute or put it in the chat. Or if any of the three of you would like to make a comment before we end.
I'll pose a question. Have you ever had to wrestle with a difficult character? You know, you want to put this character in a story, but he or she just isn't working. She's not clicking with the other characters.
I had a hard time with my Daniel, my main character, for a while. And one of my critique partners said, I don't think you know him very well. And he was absolutely right. I didn't. And I had to write, draft, and then tweak what his problem was until I could really say what his misbelief was. I didn't have a strong enough goal to wrap his character around. So once I figured out his misbelief, that really helped a lot.
I have a character in the book I'm writing right now, that romantic suspense. that I will say I'm only on the 6th chapter, but I'm having to go back and rewrite him. Because as I'm writing, my critique partners are going, I don't think so. I don't think this is right for him. And I'll be like, yeah, they're right. It really isn't right. So I'm having to remake him. So it's challenging.
I had my main character has a grandmother, and so I was trying to work out her character in my head, and finally I just had to start putting her in scenes and just try to let her voice come out, because it was not, I couldn't pre-plan her. And I had another character, an uncle, that I just axed. I was stumbling over him. He seemed like another character I had. And so it was a relief to get rid of him.
That reminds me of that movie. I think it's called The Man Who Invented Christmas. You know that movie? Yeah.
About Dickens.
I think, yeah, Charles Dickens. I think writers should watch that as a group every Christmas, because it's so funny how the characters come to him and talk to him, and he talks to them. And it's like so true. The writer's inner life. I identify with what you're saying, Jennifer.
My character also has a great grandfather, and he was an unusual character in that usually I think and think and think and think about my characters before I start writing. And he was kind of nebulous, and then he just sort of took over whatever scene he was in. He morphed in my mind, because usually I like to really see my characters in my mind. He changed without me thinking about him, and he's a lot of fun to write.
That's cool. I love it when that happens. It doesn't always happen when you want it to. That's very cool.
Anything else? All right. Well, thank you very much, panelists.
Thank you.
Wonderful
Thank you.
answers tonight, and I hope a lot of people will watch our recording.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for being a part of this.
Thanks, Betty.
Thank you.
See you all again.
Thank you.
All right. And I think Paige will stop the recording
I
now.
will stop the recording.